My name is Margaret Callahan. I'm 65. And this is the story of the Thanksgiving I stopped waiting to be seen. They said they wanted me there. Heather, my daughter-in-law, called me on a chilly Monday morning, just after I'd poured myself the first cup of tea. She sounded cheerful, warm in that careful way she always does, like she was reading from a card. "We'd love to have you here this year, Mom," she said. "Really? The kids miss you." I remember standing by the window, fingers wrapped around the mug, watching a squirrel hop through the frost. My first thought was hesitation. The second was, maybe this time it'll be different. So I packed a cranberry wool cardigan I'd bought for no one but myself. A small pie tin, the sturdy kind I've had since the early 80s. A paperback mystery I kept meaning to finish. I added a jar of fig preserves for Andrew. He never liked them, but I kept hoping he'd come around. My flight landed at 2:55 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day at Chicago Midway. The airport was humming with noise, that special chaos of reunions and rushing. People streamed past me with armfuls of flowers, glittering balloons, toddlers in knit hats. Everywhere I looked, people were being gathered, embraced, pulled into circles of warmth. I stood still under the "Arrivals a" sign. My suitcase at my side. Coat folded neatly over one arm. I checked the time. Then again. The flight had landed nearly 40 minutes ago. No text. No call. Nothing. Heather's last message was from the day before. "Can't wait to see you, Mom. Sophie's been asking when Grandma gets here. Safe travels." Heart emoji. I had replied. Landing at 2:55. "I'll wait by door 3. Can't wait to hug everyone." No response. The crowd thinned. I didn't sit. It felt like admitting something. Like defeat. Like I was the sort of woman who had been forgotten. I kept standing. That's when my phone buzzed. Not a call. Just a notification from Facebook. Now, I don't live on social media. But sometimes, just sometimes, it's where they post before they remember to tell me things. I opened the app with a sliver of hope. That was my mistake. There they were. All of them. Andrew, wearing the forest green sweater I'd knit last Christmas. Heather, laughing in that bright way that photographs well. Sophie, her curls pinned back, holding a glass of cider. And behind them, tables set, candles lit, turkey carved, Thanksgiving. In the center of it all was a pecan pie. Not mine. The caption read, "Grateful Hearts. Full table. Happy Thanksgiving from our home to yours." I stared at the photo. Zoomed in. Searched for a sign that maybe, just maybe, they were still on the way. But there was no empty chair. No extra plate. No place for me. And still, I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I put my coat on slowly. The kind of careful you only do when your body is full of noise and your face is trying to stay still. I pulled the handle of my suitcase. Walked past the other families. Past the shuttle signs. Past a woman crying into her husband's shoulder and a boy waving a crayon sign that said, "Welcome home, Dad." I kept walking. I didn't know where I was going. Just that I wasn't waiting anymore. Maybe you felt it too. That shift. When something inside you says, "No more. Not again." It's not anger. It's not even sadness. It's clarity. There's a kind of ache that happens when you finally understand, this wasn't an accident. This was a choice. And you were not it. You weren't even in the conversation. By the time I reached the curb, the sun was starting to dip behind the parking garage. That late November light, soft but cold, brushed against my cheek like a question I didn't want to answer. Was I still welcome? Did they ever really mean it? Or was I always just convenient? I didn't have those answers yet. But I knew one thing. They weren't coming. Not this time. And maybe not ever again. I looked around. No taxis. No plan. Only me, my coat, and the sharp air of a city I didn't live in. But the silence? The silence, for once, was mine. And that was the beginning. It was a Tuesday morning when the phone rang. Early November. The wind outside was whispering against the windows, the kind of sound that makes you grateful for socks and warm mugs. I was in the kitchen, folding a tea towel, halfway through reheating leftover lentil stew. The TV was on low in the living room, humming through a rerun of Jeopardy. The phone's buzz sliced through it all. Heather. I hadn't heard from her directly in weeks. She usually texted when she needed a recipe or a birthday reminder for someone on Andrew's side of the family. But a call? That was different. I answered with a quiet hello and wiped my hands on my apron. Her voice came through, bright and airy, like someone on speakerphone with a smile practiced for company. Hi, Mom. How are you? It still caught me off guard when she called me that. Mom. It used to make me feel included. Now it felt procedural. I'm well, I said. How's everyone there? Oh, we're great. Busy, you know. Sophie's got exams coming up, Andrew's knee-deep in quarterlies, and I'm just trying to keep us all sane. She laughed lightly, then paused. That kind of pause where you can almost hear her scrolling through the next line in her head. Anyway, we were talking last night, and, well, we'd love for you to come here for Thanksgiving. There was a softness in her tone, almost careful. Like she wasn't sure how the words would land. Really? I said, quieter than I meant to. Of course, she replied. It wouldn't feel right without you. Sophie especially. She keeps asking if Grandma's coming. She even picked out a spot for you at the table. That image, that I had a spot someone was thinking about, did something to me. A small warmth bloomed in my chest. Familiar, but cautious. Like the first spring day that still might snow. Are you sure? I asked, more to buy myself time than anything. Absolutely. We want you here. All of us. Want. Not need. Not can you bring the pie again, or would you mind helping with the sides? Just want. There's a difference. I used to confuse the two. I think many of us do. We tell ourselves being needed is enough. That usefulness is a form of love. But over time, that line wears thin. So when Heather said it, soft, almost too light to hold on to, it caught me. I'd love that, I said, carefully. Wonderful, she said, a little too quick. Let us know your flight details. We'll pick you up, of course. Of course, I echoed. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a moment, holding the phone like it might say more if I just waited. My stew had gone cold again. I didn't bother reheating it. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and stared out at the bare birch tree in the yard. Its branches stretched up against the pale sky like they were asking for something. Maybe I was, too. I thought about last Thanksgiving. I stayed home. Made roasted chicken with rosemary, a sweet potato gratin. Ate on the good china with the radio humming in the background. I didn't hear from Andrew until the next afternoon. He said they got caught up with the neighbors. I didn't bring it up again. But this time, they asked. Heather had called. Sophie wanted me there. They saved a spot. That's what I told myself. That night, I pulled out the folder where I kept flight vouchers and travel brochures. There was an envelope tucked in the back, the one marked emergency. Christmas money, mostly. And some rolled quarters from when I used to drive to bingo with Dorothy before she moved to Arizona. I figured this counted. I found a one-way ticket to Chicago on Thanksgiving morning. Non-stop. Reasonable fare. I even spent an extra $16 for a seat near the front with more leg room. I wanted to arrive not cramped or flustered, but steady. presentable. Later that evening, I sat in bed with my planner and made a list. Things to pack. A reminder to lower the thermostat. Buy a new pair of gloves. I added fig jam next to Andrew's name and underlined Sophie's book twice. I couldn't sleep right away. My thoughts were too loud. You know the feeling? When anticipation keeps tapping at your shoulder like a child who doesn't want to be ignored. I let myself imagine it. The welcome at the airport. Heather's half hug, Andrew's distracted smile. Sophie maybe running toward me. A plate with my name scribbled in the corner. Laughter over pie. Maybe they'd ask me about something other than weather. I know it sounds small. But sometimes small is all we want. Not grandeur. Just recognition. By morning, I had packed the cardigan and the tin pie plate wrapped in a dish towel. I placed a handwritten note inside the front pocket of my suitcase. It simply said, Thanksgiving, 2024. A tiny ritual, just for me. A marker that I was going. Not because I was expected to. But because, for once, I thought I was invited. Funny how hope can look so much like certainty when it wears the right coat. But as I would learn soon enough, hope isn't the same as truth. And a saved seat doesn't always mean a place is waiting. The next morning, I started making lists. It's what I've always done when things feel uncertain. A list means purpose. Structure. Even when the reason for it trembles a little. I wrote it out in my spiral-bound notepad, the one I keep in the drawer by the stove. Groceries, reminders, people I need to send birthday cards to. I flipped to a clean page and titled it in blue ink, Thanksgiving Trip, Chicago. The first item I wrote was pie tin. That felt important. Not the pie itself. I knew Heather would probably order dessert from that overpriced bakery near their house, the one with the glossy windows and lemon lavender cupcakes. But the pie tin, my old one, scratched at the base and blackened at the edges, meant I'd come with intention. That I hadn't arrived empty-handed. Next came clothes. I decided on the charcoal cardigan I'd picked up from a local boutique last spring. It was soft, warm, just long enough to skim my hips. It had tiny shell buttons, not flashy, but somehow elegant. I had never worn it. It still had the tag tucked inside the sleeve. I added it to the list. Next to it, in parentheses, I wrote, something nice. Something that says I belong. I bought my ticket that same afternoon. Found a morning flight out of Bangor, with a short layover in Detroit, then into Midway. I splurged the extra $23 for early boarding. It wasn't about boarding first. It was about not feeling like the last person picked for something. I emailed the itinerary to Heather, though she hadn't asked for it. No reply. But I told myself they were busy. Work, school, Thanksgiving prep. That kind of busy that keeps you from calling but not from posting 3 stories a day about your coffee. Later that day, I walked to the corner bookstore. Bought Sophie a paperback she'd mentioned months ago in passing, a historical fiction novel with a nurse on the cover. The woman looked strong. Capable. Worn but standing. I picked up a box of chocolate-covered almonds too. Heather had once said they were her weakness. I wrapped them in tissue paper and slipped them into a side pocket of my suitcase. You know, I used to bring gifts because I thought it was polite. But lately, I wonder if it was a way to apologize for taking up space. To prove I was still useful. Still worth the trip. The truth? Sometimes it feels like we pack our bags with more than clothes. We pack proof. We pack softness. We pack hope that won't weigh too much. That night, I did laundry. Folded everything neatly. Even ironed my slacks. The house smelled like lemon starch and fabric softener. I lowered the thermostat, took out the trash, left the porch light on a timer. I didn't tell my neighbor I was leaving. It felt like if I said it out loud, it might not happen. 3 days before the flight, I walked to the florist on Grant Street. It's a tiny place, run by a woman named Ray who wears thick-rimmed glasses and talks about flowers like they're people. I didn't go for a bouquet. I went for a single stem. I chose a cream-colored lisianthus. Simple, delicate, understated. I placed it in a recycled jam jar on the kitchen table. One nice thing to greet me when I came home. Because part of me knew I might need the reminder. The night before the trip, I sat at the dining table, suitcase open, list beside me. I checked each item off slowly. Socks. Lip balm. Reading glasses. A plastic bag of Werther's caramels for the plane. It made me feel steady. Like I had control over at least this much. I went to bed early. Slept lightly, the kind of sleep where your brain hovers above the bed like it's waiting for the next thing. I woke up twice. Once at 1:48. Then again at 4:03. When the alarm buzzed, I was already awake. I dressed with care. Black slacks, soft turtleneck, cardigan over the top. Pearl studs I hadn't worn since Easter. I wanted to look like someone worth arriving for. I wanted to look like I belonged at that table. The cab arrived just after 6. The driver didn't say much, which I was grateful for. The streets were quiet, a soft gray mist curling around the sidewalks. My suitcase bumped along the curb as he lifted it into the trunk. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house. Lights off. Curtains still drawn. But the lisianthus stood tall in the jar on the table. A silent witness to my leaving. The airport was already buzzing. Families in matching hoodies. College kids with backpacks and bedheads. Elderly couples clinging to each other's arms like anchors. I stood in line. Got my boarding pass. Took off my shoes for security. Put them back on with shaking hands. In the waiting area, I sat between a man eating trail mix and a woman knitting something soft and blue. I didn't speak to either of them. But the rhythm of her needles calmed me. It felt like someone else was making something steady. When the gate agent called boarding group 2, I stood. Smoothed my pants. Adjusted my cardigan. And as I stepped forward, I told myself this was it. I was going. Invited. Wanted. Or so I still believed. Even now, I wish that had been true. The next morning, I started making lists. It's what I've always done when things feel uncertain. A list means purpose. Structure. Even when the reason for it trembles a little. I wrote it out in my spiral-bound notepad, the one I keep in the drawer by the stove. Groceries, reminders, people I need to send birthday cards to. I flipped to a clean page and titled it in blue ink, Thanksgiving Trip, Chicago. The first item I wrote was pie tin. That felt important. Not the pie itself. I knew Heather would probably order dessert from that overpriced bakery near their house, the one with the glossy windows and lemon lavender cupcakes. But the pie tin, my old one, scratched at the base and blackened at the edges, meant I'd come with intention. That I hadn't arrived empty-handed. Next came clothes. I decided on the charcoal cardigan I'd picked up from a local boutique last spring. It was soft, warm, just long enough to skim my hips. It had tiny shell buttons, not flashy, but somehow elegant. I had never worn it. It still had the tag tucked inside the sleeve. I added it to the list. Next to it, in parentheses, I wrote, something nice. Something that says I belong. I bought my ticket that same afternoon. Found a morning flight out of Bangor, with a short layover in Detroit, then into Midway. I splurged the extra $23 for early boarding. It wasn't about boarding first. It was about not feeling like the last person picked for something. I emailed the itinerary to Heather, though she hadn't asked for it. No reply. But I told myself they were busy. Work, school, Thanksgiving prep. That kind of busy that keeps you from calling but not from posting 3 stories a day about your coffee. Later that day, I walked to the corner bookstore. Bought Sophie a paperback she'd mentioned months ago in passing, a historical fiction novel with a nurse on the cover. The woman looked strong. Capable. Worn but standing. I picked up a box of chocolate-covered almonds too. Heather had once said they were her weakness. I wrapped them in tissue paper and slipped them into a side pocket of my suitcase. You know, I used to bring gifts because I thought it was polite. But lately, I wonder if it was a way to apologize for taking up space. To prove I was still useful. Still worth the trip. The truth? Sometimes it feels like we pack our bags with more than clothes. We pack proof. We pack softness. We pack hope that won't weigh too much. That night, I did laundry. Folded everything neatly. Even ironed my slacks. The house smelled like lemon starch and fabric softener. I lowered the thermostat, took out the trash, left the porch light on a timer. I didn't tell my neighbor I was leaving. It felt like if I said it out loud, it might not happen. 3 days before the flight, I walked to the florist on Grant Street. It's a tiny place, run by a woman named Ray who wears thick-rimmed glasses and talks about flowers like they're people. I didn't go for a bouquet. I went for a single stem. I chose a cream-colored lisianthus. Simple, delicate, understated. I placed it in a recycled jam jar on the kitchen table. One nice thing to greet me when I came home. Because part of me knew, I might need the reminder. The night before the trip, I sat at the dining table, suitcase open, list beside me. I checked each item off slowly. Socks. Lip balm. Reading glasses. A plastic bag of Werther's caramels for the plane. It made me feel steady. Like I had control over at least this much. I went to bed early. Slept lightly, the kind of sleep where your brain hovers above the bed like it's waiting for the next thing. I woke up twice. Once at 1:48. Then again at 4:03. When the alarm buzzed, I was already awake. I dressed with care. Black slacks, soft turtleneck, cardigan over the top. Pearl studs I hadn't worn since Easter. I wanted to look like someone worth arriving for. I wanted to look like I belonged at that table. The cab arrived just after 6. The driver didn't say much, which I was grateful for. The streets were quiet, a soft gray mist curling around the sidewalks. My suitcase bumped along the curb as he lifted it into the trunk. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house. Lights off. Curtains still drawn. But the lisianthus stood tall in the jar on the table. A silent witness to my leaving. The airport was already buzzing. Families in matching hoodies. College kids with backpacks and bedheads. Elderly couples clinging to each other's arms like anchors. I stood in line. Got my boarding pass. Took off my shoes for security. Put them back on with shaking hands. In the waiting area, I sat between a man eating trail mix and a woman knitting something soft and blue. I didn't speak to either of them. But the rhythm of her needles calmed me. It felt like someone else was making something steady. When the gate agent called boarding group 2, I stood. Smoothed my pants. Adjusted my cardigan. And as I stepped forward, I told myself this was it. I was going. Invited. Wanted. Or so I still believed. Even now, I wish that had been true. It was the pie that stopped me. Not the faces. Not the lights. Not even the caption. It was that pie. Perfect lattice crust. Dark, syrupy center. Just enough burn around the edges to make it look homemade. But it wasn't mine. I was sitting on a cold bench near the taxi stand when I opened the app again. My suitcase rested against my leg like a dog waiting for direction. The sky had dropped to that dull, wintry blue, the kind that flattens everything. Even the wind felt tired. I hadn't meant to look. I only reopened my phone because it buzzed. A little vibration that sparked a stupid, foolish thought. Maybe it was them. Maybe they were lost in traffic. Maybe the turkey had burned. Maybe they were still coming. Instead, it was Instagram. Heather's post sat at the top of my feed. Posted 20 minutes ago. Grateful, as always, it said. A full table. A full heart. Happy Thanksgiving from the Wexlers. I stared at it too long. Andrew stood at the head of the table, knife in hand, already slicing into the turkey. He wore a soft green button-down I didn't recognize. Sophie leaned toward him, holding a glass of sparkling cider. Ruby flashed a peace sign at the camera, her hair tied back in a messy braid I had once taught Heather to do. Everyone was smiling. Heather's expression was just right. Warm, welcoming, slightly posed. The hostess look. She had always been good at that. In the background, the candles flickered on the dining table. Cloth napkins. A rosemary wreath around the centerpiece. The table runner I'd given them last Christmas stretched beneath the dishes. That pie, sitting on a cake stand, sat like a signature. And nowhere, was I. Not behind the camera. Not off to the side. Not expected. There wasn't even an empty chair. Not even a goddamn placeholder. It wasn't just a photo. It was evidence. Of what? Of exactly what I'd been trying not to believe for years. I enlarged the image. I don't know why. Maybe looking for a sliver of proof that this was still an oversight. A last-minute plan. A rescheduling mishap. I searched the image the way you search a blurry face in a crowd, knowing what you want isn't there, but hoping you're wrong anyway. Nothing. And still. I didn't cry. It's strange how the body behaves in these moments. The way pain moves not like a wave but like a settling. Quiet. Bone deep. I don't know what hurt more. The fact that they had the dinner without me. Or the realization that they hadn't even tried to hide it. They weren't rushing. They weren't texting apologies or checking flight times. They were already eating. Already celebrating. Already whole. Without me. You ever feel that? That exact brand of heartbreak that doesn't come from what's done to you, but from what's never even considered. That was me. Sitting on a hard bench outside an airport, watching a photo tell me the truth my family never had the courage to say out loud. That I was not essential. That I was background. Optional. Bonus material for when they needed to feel good about themselves. I scrolled back once more. Read the caption again. A full table. I remember reading somewhere that people will forget what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. This made me feel erased. Not excluded. Not forgotten. Erased. That kind of omission takes effort. It takes a choice. And they made it. The only thing that flickered in me, as I sat there, was the question I couldn't stop asking. Why invite me at all? Why ask? Why put me on a plane and not leave a seat? But the answer was already clear. Because it looked good to ask. Because it filled a box on a checklist called family. Because somewhere in their minds, the invitation was the gesture. The act. The whole thing. And showing up? Well. That was my mistake. The wind picked up. A leaf skittered past my feet. My hands shook, but I wasn't cold. I stared at the screen one last time before I locked it. Heather's voice floated in my head. We want you here. I wanted to believe her. God, I did. But the photo was louder than her voice. And the table, complete, curated, clean, had no room for me. I stood. Not dramatically. Not with any big breath or final thought. I just stood. And that was the moment. The one that cracked something quiet and long held inside me. Not the loneliness. The knowing. That I had always been waiting for something that wasn't coming. And maybe never had been. I pulled my coat tighter. Rolled my suitcase toward the sidewalk. A man passed me, pushing a stroller. He nodded. I nodded back. Strangers, for 1 second, seeing each other. It was more than I'd been given all day. I walked until my feet started to ache. Not a dramatic walk. Not a movie scene march into the unknown. Just steps. One after another. Past the long row of rental shuttles. Past the cold gray sidewalk that lined the airport fence. No plan. No hotel. No one waiting. It was almost 5. The sky had dimmed into that gritty Midwest dusk. No stars. No sunset. Just a flat, blank cold. My phone buzzed again. I didn't check it. Whatever it said, I already knew the message. Not coming. I turned the corner past a strip of low buildings. One was a closed auto parts store. Another looked like an old coin laundry with the lights off. And then I saw it. A squat little diner called Maggie's Table. Neon letters, buzzing slightly, half the G flickering. The windows were fogged from the inside. A paper turkey was taped crookedly to the glass. I paused. Something about it felt, still. Like it hadn't changed in 20 years. Like it didn't care what you looked like or who was supposed to pick you up. I stepped inside. The bell above the door gave a tired chime. The kind that sounds like it's rung too many times. Inside smelled like hot grease, coffee, and something sweet. A mix that should have been unpleasant but wasn't. There were only 5 people there. A man in a postal jacket hunched over pancakes. A young couple sharing fries, faces lit by their phones. A woman at the counter in bright pink scrubs, sipping soup and staring at nothing. A waitress appeared from the kitchen. Late 30s, blonde braid, mascara slightly smudged. She looked like someone who'd worked Thanksgiving every year and stopped minding. She smiled at me. "Happy Thanksgiving, hon," she said, like she meant it. "Same to you," I replied. My voice held. Barely. She gestured toward a booth by the window. I slid into the vinyl seat. It was warm. The table was clean. Someone had set a plastic flower in a chipped mason jar at the center. I noticed the flower was fake but also dusted, like someone still took the time to care for the illusion. "Kitchen's a little slow tonight," the waitress said, handing me a laminated menu. "But we've got roast turkey, stuffing, and pie." I nodded. "What kind of pie?" Her face brightened. "Pumpkin, apple, or banana cream. All made in-house." "Pumpkin. And a cup of tea, if you have it." "You got it, sweetheart." She disappeared behind the swinging door, humming something soft and off-key. I exhaled. The kind of exhale that comes when you didn't realize you'd been holding your breath. I looked around. The radio played low in the background, an old song I used to hum while folding laundry. The kind that sticks in your memory, even if you don't remember the lyrics. I took off my coat slowly. Set it beside me. Folded the edges the way I always do. My suitcase sat by my feet. I flipped my phone face down on the table. And for the first time all day, I stopped waiting. Stopped hoping for a correction. A rescue. A text that would say it was all a mix-up. I wasn't dramatic about it. Just quiet. Sometimes the loudest decisions are made without a sound. The tea came first. Strong, dark, poured into a ceramic mug with a small crack along the rim. Then the pie. It was warm. The crust was uneven, a little too dark in places, and there was a dollop of whipped cream sinking slightly to one side. It was beautiful. I took a bite. And it hit me. Not the flavor. Though it was good. Nutmeg, cinnamon, something unexpected like cardamom. But the fact that I wasn't serving it to anyone else. I wasn't cutting slices for a table. I wasn't being watched to see if I'd offer the last piece. I was just eating it. For me. It might have been the first time in years. You ever notice how much of yourself you give away without even realizing it? How often you hand out pieces of your time, your energy, your joy, just to keep other people full. I used to think that was love. Maybe it is. But maybe love isn't supposed to leave you hollow. I chewed slowly. Let the heat return to my fingers. Let the tea burn just enough to remind me I was still here. The door jingled again behind me, and another customer stepped in. But I didn't turn. My eyes stayed on the pie. I didn't check my phone. I didn't rehearse what I'd say if they finally called. I didn't think about the photo. For once, I let the moment exist. When the waitress came back to check on me, she wiped her hands on her apron. Want another slice to go? I paused. Then I nodded. Yes. For later. She smiled. Best decision you'll make all day. She was right. It wasn't a home-cooked meal. It wasn't a family gathering. It wasn't laughter around a crowded table. But it was something real. Something earned. I paid in cash. Slipped a $5 under the plate. Took the little white paper bag with my second slice, still warm. Outside, the wind had picked up. But it didn't sting the same. My suitcase clicked gently against the pavement. I didn't know where I was going. Not yet. But for the first time all day, I wasn't afraid to find out. I spotted the sign just past a closed tire shop. Faded red letters lit by 2 flickering bulbs. Valley Pines Motel. Underneath, a smaller banner said, "Vacancy," in crooked plastic letters. No fancy branding. No slogan. Just the promise of a bed. By then, my feet were sore. My shoulders ached from the weight of the suitcase and something heavier I couldn't name yet. The office smelled like old coffee and pine sol. A small TV perched in the corner played a game show, volume too low to follow. The man behind the counter wore a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, and glasses with one side taped. He barely looked up. I stood there for a moment before speaking. "Do you have a room?" "Single?" he asked, eyes still on the screen. "Yes. Just for one night." He handed me a clipboard. Name. ID card. I filled out the form slowly. My handwriting looked smaller than usual. "Room 6, he said, sliding me a metal key attached to a long red plastic fob. "End of the row." "Heat works. Wi-Fi spotty." I nodded. "Thanks." He didn't smile. But he didn't need to. He gave me a door, and that was enough. Outside, the night had dropped several degrees. I walked past 4 closed doors, all painted a chipped teal color. My breath fogged in front of me. Room 6 was tucked in the corner, next to the ice machine. I unlocked the door and stepped into a space that smelled faintly of soap and something synthetic. The room was exactly what you'd expect. 2 lamps, mismatched shades. A short dresser. Beige carpet that had seen too many winters. A bed with a comforter in a muted maroon pattern, thin but neatly made. I dropped my suitcase by the wall and stood there a moment. It was quiet. Not peaceful. Just still. The heater clicked on with a low grumble. I slipped off my shoes. Peeled off my coat. Sat on the edge of the bed. And finally, I breathed. Not deeply. Not dramatically. Just enough. The tears didn't come. I waited, but they didn't. Instead, I felt aware. Not angry. Not broken. Just aware. Like someone had turned on the light in a room I'd been sitting in for years without realizing it was dark. I reached into my bag and pulled out my notebook. The one I use for grocery lists, to-dos, reminders to call the bank or pick up stamps. I flipped to a clean page and wrote one sentence. I am not extra. The words sat there. Unmoving. Plain. Sharp. I stared at them for a long time. Then I underlined them. That's when I felt something shift. Not everything. Just the beginning. I got up. Walked to the small sink near the door and splashed cold water on my face. It smelled faintly of chlorine. I didn't mind. I opened the paper bag from the diner and took out the second slice of pumpkin pie. The crust had flaked a little in transit. I ate it with the plastic fork the waitress had tucked inside. Sitting cross-legged on the motel bed, wrapped in a borrowed stillness, I ate every bite. Not out of sadness. Not out of hunger. But because it was mine. You know, I used to think self-worth came from how many people needed you. How many lists you were on. How many chairs you filled. But that night, with my suitcase zipped and the heat humming and the pie almost gone, I realized something else. Sometimes, self-worth begins with stepping away. With choosing not to wait anymore. The television clicked on by accident when I leaned against the remote. A rerun of an old sitcom filled the room with canned laughter. I turned the volume down to a whisper. In the quiet, I made a cup of motel tea from the machine near the bathroom. It tasted like cardboard and chamomile. I drank it anyway. I sat with my knees pulled to my chest. Let the steam rise into the air, curl into the corners of the room. Outside, a car pulled in. Headlights swept across the curtains. Then faded. It was after midnight. I was tired. Not just from travel. But from years of leaning in, giving more, softening when I should have held my shape. I lay down without changing clothes. Just pulled the scratchy blanket up to my chin and let the weight of the day press me gently into the mattress. My phone buzzed once. I didn't check it. I knew the pattern by now. I reached out, turned off the lamp, and closed my eyes. The motel was quiet. The heater rattled now and then. Somewhere down the row, a door creaked open. A laugh floated past, quickly swallowed by the wind. But inside that small room, with pie crumbs on the nightstand and a sentence in my notebook, I felt more grounded than I had in years. And that was the beginning. Not of healing. But of seeing. Of knowing. That the waiting was over. The morning after the motel, I woke before the sun. Habit, mostly. My body has been trained for decades to rise early, even when there's nothing urgent left to do. The air inside the room was still. Faintly warm from the old wall heater. My clothes from yesterday lay folded on the chair. I slipped them back on without hesitation. There's something about being dismissed so cleanly that makes you stop caring about appearances. Not out of spite. But clarity. By 7:45, I was walking down the sidewalk with my suitcase in one hand and the pie box in the other. I passed a shuttered dry cleaner, a pawn shop with fogged windows, and a man drinking coffee from a thermos on a crate. He nodded at me. I nodded back. The bank was 3 blocks from the motel. A squat, brick building tucked between a chain pharmacy and a nail salon called Pink Cloud. The kind of place that doesn't have sliding doors or classical music playing in the lobby. Just a rubber mat, a coffee station with powdered creamer, and chairs that creak when you sit down. I stepped inside and felt the artificial heat wrap around me. Too dry. Too strong. But it meant I could take off my gloves. The teller was a young man. Mid-20s. Brown hair combed straight back, tie slightly askew. He looked up, gave me a polite half-smile. The kind reserved for elderly customers who take too long. Good morning, ma'am. What can I help you with today? I straightened my coat, then spoke. I'd like to speak with someone about my accounts. All of them. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Not in judgment. Just curiosity. Sure. Let me see who's available. He picked up the phone. Spoke quietly. Then looked back at me. Someone will be right out. I took a seat in the waiting area. There was a rack of magazines, most of them 2 months old. A fake ficus plant drooped in the corner. The smell of toner lingered near the printer behind the counter. A woman appeared after 5 minutes. Blonde. Mid-40s. Clean blazer, minimal jewelry. She wore her hair in a short bob that framed her face in the way women who do Pilates always manage to pull off. Mrs. Callahan? Yes. I'm Dana. Come on back. Her office was glass-walled, small, and efficient. On her desk, a photo of a dog and a small jar of almonds. She gestured to the chair across from her. I sat. What can I do for you today? I looked her in the eye. Firm. Steady. I want to stop all automatic transfers. Every single one. She blinked. Sat up straighter. Clicked her mouse a few times. All of them? Yes. Starting today. Her fingers paused above the keyboard. You've got several recurring payments. Tuition for Ruby's program. The car insurance for Andrew's Camry. Utilities for the Evanston apartment. And the monthly allowance transfers to Heather's card. She didn't say it judgmentally. Just listed the facts. Like reading a recipe aloud. I nodded. Stop them all. She hesitated. Would you like to talk about why? I shook my head. Not angrily. Just done. I've spent enough time explaining myself. Her mouth tightened slightly. Then she nodded. Understood. She turned back to the screen. Her nails clicked softly against the keys. It took 15 minutes. While she worked, I stared out the glass wall into the bank lobby. A man walked in wearing a puffer jacket and wool gloves. A little girl trailed behind him, holding a pink stuffed animal by one ear. She wasn't talking. Just watching everything with big, curious eyes. I remember when Sophie looked at the world like that. Dana turned back toward me. Everything's been suspended. If you'd like to cancel them permanently, I'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning. You can come back to sign. I will. She hesitated. There's also a power of attorney on file. Gregory Callahan. Do you want him to remain on that? I paused. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel my pulse jump. No shame. No guilt. No. Revoke it. Her eyes met mine again. Understood. She printed a form. Handed me a pen. I signed. Slowly. Clearly. The way you sign something when you mean every line. By the time I stood to leave, I felt quieter. Lighter. Not liberated. Not yet. But something closer to steady. As I walked back out into the cold, I noticed the girl with the stuffed animal was watching me from behind the glass. Her chin resting on the arm of the chair. I gave her the smallest smile. She didn't smile back. But she didn't look away either. I crossed the parking lot slowly. No rush. My boots pressed against the patches of frost that hadn't melted yet. I wasn't doing this to punish anyone. Not really. I was doing it because giving had become the only language I was allowed to speak in that family. And I was ready to be fluent in something else. Maybe peace. Maybe dignity. Maybe just silence that didn't feel like defeat. That afternoon, I bought myself a fresh loaf of sourdough and a small bar of dark chocolate from the market near the bus stop. I walked home with my hands warm in my pockets. And for the first time in years, I didn't check my phone once. It took me 3 days to make the appointment. Not because I wasn't sure. I was. I had been for a long time, though I hadn't let myself admit it. It's strange how much you can ignore when the disappointment comes in small, steady doses. Like water slowly leaking through a ceiling. But that photo changed something. Or maybe it didn't change anything at all. Maybe it just named what had already been broken. The lawyer's office was in a red brick building on Elm Street. Above a bakery that always smelled like cinnamon rolls, even in July. The hallway to the stairs was narrow. Faint music played from a speaker hidden somewhere near the ceiling. Something instrumental. Something careful. I wore my black wool coat. The one with the inside pocket I never used. I pulled my hair back in a loose twist, dabbed on a little rose lip balm. I didn't dress up to impress anyone. I dressed like a woman who had decided what mattered. The receptionist greeted me with a soft voice and warm hands. She offered tea. I declined. They led me into a small conference room with a round table and one wall lined with law books that looked more decorative than used. Mr. Brenner walked in 2 minutes later. He was in his 60s. Kind eyes. Wore corduroy pants and a navy sweater with suede patches on the elbows. He smiled when he saw me. "Margaret. It's been a while." "Yes. It has." He sat across from me. Opened a leather folder. "I have your last will and power of attorney paperwork here. Do you want to go over anything before we begin?" I shook my head. "No. I know what I want." He waited. "I want everything, my house, the savings, the insurance, transferred to Sophie. Not Andrew. Not Heather. Just Sophie." His pen stilled. But his face didn't change. "Are you sure?" "Yes." No hesitation. No explanation. Still, he asked, "Would you like to designate a backup, in case?" "No." He nodded again. Wrote something in the margins. I leaned back in my chair. You know, I used to picture something very different when I imagined this moment. A long conversation. Maybe tears. Some sense of closure. But instead, it felt procedural. Clean. Quiet. I think that's what happens when your decision is made long before the paperwork. He clicked his pen. "And the reasoning, for the record?" I paused. Then said, "She's the only one who ever looked me in the eye and asked how I was really doing. She's the only one who listened. Not performed. Not placated. Listened." He didn't write that part down. He didn't have to. "All right," he said. "Give me until Monday to draft the revisions. You can come in to sign then." I nodded. "That's fine." He stood. I stood. He extended his hand. As I shook it, he said, "This might feel heavier later." "I've carried heavier," I replied. And I meant it. Outside, the cold air met my skin like a question. But this time, I didn't flinch. I walked down the block to the little coffee stand near the post office. Ordered a plain drip with a splash of cream. The woman behind the counter wore silver eyeliner and a thick scarf. She complimented my coat. I said thank you. Then I walked 2 blocks further to the public library. Not for books. Just for a seat. For quiet. I found a chair by the window. Took out my notebook. Flipped past old lists and scribbles and landed on the page I'd written at the motel. "I am not extra." I underlined it again. Then, just beneath it, I wrote, "I choose Sophie." It felt different from saying I cut the others out. Because this wasn't about punishment. Not anymore. It was about direction. Intention. Ownership. I didn't owe anyone access to what I'd built. I didn't owe them the parts of me they had ignored for years. But Sophie. She'd seen me. Maybe just in fragments. A short visit. A summer weekend. A card with her handwriting tucked in the corner of a Christmas envelope. But she noticed. That mattered. More than shared blood or matching last names. More than holidays missed or calls unreturned. Sometimes, love looks like a girl who sends you a book with a sticky note that says, "Thought of you. Hope you're well." That's it. No demand. No performance. Just a thread, offered gently. That thread was enough. I sat there until the coffee cooled. Outside, the afternoon had shifted. Shadows stretched across the sidewalk. A child in a red jacket skipped past the window, dragging a backpack too big for her frame. I closed my notebook, slipped it into my bag. And in that quiet library chair, I realized. Maybe this was my real inheritance. Not the house. Not the bank account. But the clarity to give without begging to be received. To see myself first. And to leave behind something better than resentment. Something chosen. Something named. Sophie. I didn't expect her to arrive so early. It was late morning when I got the call. Sophie's voice caught between excitement and nerves. She was finally visiting, fall break, just before finals, and a few hours on the train. "Grandma, I'm on the 10:15, she said. "In a bit I'll be there." "I can't wait." "That's Sophie for you." Genuine. Unhurried. I tucked the phone into my cardigan pocket and slipped out onto the porch. The wind was cool, and I could taste the coming winter in it. I smiled. Made a cup of tea, silver mug, I kept it for visitors. I set the table in the living room. Not for a crowd. Just 2 cups, a small bowl of roasted chestnuts, and the chessboard Sophie used to love. I found those old token pieces in a drawer. The board's corners were chipped. I thought, she deserves those. Whoever she is now. I sat near the window, fingers tracing the rim of the mug. I watched the smoke rise from the chimney across the street. A neighbor walked her dog in a red scarf. Autumn leaves drifted behind them. I thought of the first time Sophie called me safe place. That phrase still held weight. When I saw her step off the train, I realized things had finally calmed. She wore jeans, a scarf knitted in stripes she never finished telling me about, and sneakers scuffed at the toes. Her hair was shorter, curled at the ends. I rose slowly. No rigidness anymore. Just intention. "Grandma," she said, and I embraced her. Warm. Real. I didn't ask about her classes or what she was studying. I already knew, in general. But that first hug, no questions needed. We walked back under a sky that had turned dusty blue. The porch trimmed with yellow morning light. I carried the chestnut bowl, she carried her backpack. The house hadn't changed. It smelled like lavender and old wood, comfort I never noticed until I saw her shoulders relax. She dropped her bag in the corner. Sat at my old swivel chair. I brought out 2 mugs and set them on the table. She watched the chessboard, then looked at me. "You still play?" I never stopped. We played. She beat me twice. Then I beat her once. We didn't keep score beyond that. No one distracted us. No clock ticking. Only the board, our quiet moves, and the connection growing in between. Later, we sat at the kitchen table with tea again. Sunlight dribbled through the windows, across a small poinsettia I bought earlier in the week, bright red as hope. She read the letter I'd sent. She traced the lines with her finger. Said, "I've never seen you write like that." I shrugged. Never needed to. She nodded. "I'm tired of pretending, Grandma." That surprised me. Not because of the sentiment, that came, over time, but the firmness behind it. "She's good," I told her. "Stronger than I am now." She brushed her fingers through her curls. "Dad doesn't know I'm here." I figured. She sighed, "I didn't want complicated. And I didn't think you needed explaining." I nodded, slowly. That was the moment I felt not broken anymore. Not whole. Just here. With someone who exists in the space between knife-lit pies and missed calls. That night, she offered to cook. Pasta with garlic and spinach. I grated cheese while she stirred. It wasn't a feast. It tasted like something made with care. Nothing heavy. Just honest. Later we watched a movie, silly, laugh-out-loud funny. She cracked up at parts that didn't even need laughter. I did too. It felt like a gift being free of tension. I didn't know I needed it. Before bed she sat on the couch beside me. Soft light from a lamp. "I don't want to lose you," she said. Her voice trembled in a way I felt in my chest. "I can't promise forever," I replied. "Does that mean you're not coming again?" I looked at her. "No. I'm not going anywhere yet." She hugged me again. Gentler. But real. True. Later, I sat in the dark with the glow of the TV still fading. I looked at old pictures on the mantel. One framed photo, me carrying newborn Sophie wrapped in a quilt, hair dark, face softer. I held her tight then. I still held her tight now. Different times. Different weight. I got up and turned off the light. The house felt fuller, though quieter than usual. Sunday morning, the sky turned soft. She left for the station with a container of pasta, a hastily crocheted scarf, and a quiet kind of love I didn't need to explain. On the porch, I watched the train disappear. The air colored pale. Leaves drifted again, careless as snow. And I thought I wasn't lonely anymore. I thought I had someone. A promise less tidy than a will. More sturdy than an apology. And for the first time in weeks I believed it. They showed up on a Sunday. Cold, gray light through the kitchen window. I was making oatmeal, stirring slowly, adding a pinch of cinnamon. It was one of those mornings when silence doesn't feel lonely. It just feels earned. Then the knock. Firm. Repetitive. I knew it wasn't Sophie. She would have texted first. Or just used the spare key. I opened the door. Heather stood there. Next to her, Andrew. Arms folded. Face unreadable. Behind them, their car still idling at the curb. I didn't say anything right away. Heather was the first to speak. "Hi, Mom. We need to talk." She said it like a line rehearsed. Tense. Tidy. I stepped aside. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and something faintly metallic. Maybe the radiator. They didn't take off their coats. That told me everything. I sat. They remained standing. "Why'd you cut us off?" Heather asked. Her voice sharper now. "No warning. Nothing. You just shut everything down." Andrew added, "You canceled the insurance. Ruby's tuition. You froze everything. And you didn't say a word." I sipped my tea. Let the warmth settle in my chest before answering. "I did what I needed to." Heather laughed. It wasn't joyful. "So this is punishment?" I met her eyes. "No. This is clarity." Andrew stepped forward. "You always said family comes first." "No," I said quietly. "I always hoped it did." Heather crossed her arms. Her scarf was the same one I bought her 2 Christmases ago. It was bunched tightly around her neck like it was holding something in. "We invited you. You just didn't come. You didn't wait. You didn't even check if I landed." The table was already full. There was silence. The kind that doesn't echo. Then Heather shook her head. "We thought you'd be late. We didn't mean to leave you out." I studied her face. That soft edge of panic people wear when their story is no longer holding. I nodded slowly. "I've made excuses for you two for years. To friends. To myself. I always thought love meant continuing to try. But maybe it means knowing when to stop asking for a seat." Andrew's jaw twitched. "So what now? Sophie gets everything? That's what this is?" I leaned forward. Placed my mug down gently. "She gets nothing I didn't already give to you. The difference is she saw it." Heather's face hardened. "She manipulated you. She got close so she could take more." I smiled. Not kindly. But truthfully. Sophie came with nothing in her hands but her time. Andrew looked down. Then out the window. The radiator clicked in the corner. A crow landed on the porch rail outside, looked in like it knew something we didn't. Heather took a breath. So this is final? Yes. You won't even talk to Ruby again? Ruby's always welcome. If she ever comes on her own. Andrew looked like he might say something more. But didn't. I stood. Slowly. Not out of drama. But peace. I'm not angry anymore. And that's the problem, isn't it? Heather flinched. Because now you can't use guilt. Or obligation. Or the holidays. Now I don't owe you comfort. You have to earn it. I stepped closer. For years, silence meant I was weak. But this time, it means I'm done. The room fell into a hush so dense I could hear the kettle settling on the stove. They stood there. Still dressed for a short visit. A confrontation, not a reconciliation. I opened the door. You should go. Heather stepped out first. Andrew followed without a word. At the car, she turned back. Dad would be ashamed. I didn't flinch. No. He'd be relieved. Someone finally said what he never could. She stared at me. Then got in. The car pulled away slowly. No wave. No glance back. I stood on the porch until the engine sound disappeared. The wind picked up slightly. Inside, the oatmeal had gone cold. I didn't reheat it. I just sat. Watched the steam rise from my untouched mug. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel shaken. I felt finished. Not broken. Finished. And that, oddly, was the most peaceful thing I'd felt in years. It's been 3 weeks. The house is quiet now. Not empty. Just quiet in a way that feels deserved. Not hollow. Not waiting. Just mine. I moved a few things around. Switched the love seat to face the garden window. Packed up the old china I never used. Donated 4 bags of clothes I hadn't worn since Greg passed. I kept his gray sweater though. The one that still smells like cedar and a hint of something I can't quite place. Maybe time. Yesterday I planted winter pansies along the walkway. Deep purple. Yellow centers. Hardy little things. They bloom even when the ground says they shouldn't. Funny how that feels familiar. The neighbors have stopped asking about Thanksgiving. I think they sense the shift. They ask about the flowers instead. The new curtains. My recipe for pumpkin muffins. Sometimes reinvention is just living differently in the same space. Sophie calls every few days. Never long conversations. But easy. She tells me about her finals. Her roommate's weird candle obsession. A boy in her philosophy class who misquotes Nietzsche but thinks he's profound. I laugh. I tell her to keep reading. Keep watching. Keep her heart soft and her spine steel. She listens. The other day she sent me a photo. Just her, on the campus lawn, book in her lap. The caption said, "Grandma, it's a good morning." And it was. Even for me. The will is finalized. I signed it in the lawyer's office with no tremble in my hand. When he asked if I was sure, I said yes before he finished the question. People think decisions like that are dramatic. That they're fueled by rage or betrayal. But sometimes, they're just quiet. Sometimes choosing yourself isn't about walking away. It's about staying still while others leave. There's power in that. I never told Andrew or Heather about the changes. I didn't need to. The truth will find them eventually. It always does. But here's what I've learned. Silence is not surrender. It's not absence. Or weakness. Or a door left ajar for guilt to slip through. Silence, sometimes, is the loudest boundary you can draw. It's saying, I am here. Still. Just not for you. You ever realize that? That peace isn't always soft. Sometimes it's solid. Structured. With edges. I used to think love meant loyalty. Even when it hurt. Even when it drained. But now I think love means reciprocity. And when that's gone, what remains is habit. Obligation. Grief wearing a mask. I've taken walks every morning. Same path. Through the Oakline Street, past the little cafe with the blue awning and the girl who plays jazz at 7 a.m. through her phone speaker while sweeping the sidewalk. I nod to her now. She nods back. I sit on the bench across from the bookstore sometimes. Watch people. Watch their conversations. Their pauses. The way their shoulders move when they laugh or lie. I never used to notice that. Now I do. Sometimes I bring my notebook. I don't write about pain. I write what I want next. Not plans. Just hopes. Like a kitchen full of light. A letter from someone unexpected. New socks. Always underrated. And maybe, someday, a Thanksgiving with just one chair across from mine. Someone who says, "You matter because I want you here. Not because I owe you." I don't know what happens next. I don't have a big resolution. No apology came. No dramatic doorstep reunion. No tearful call begging me to reconsider. And I'm glad. Because that would have muddied the clarity I fought for. I didn't ask for vengeance. I asked for room. And I took it. You might wonder if it's lonely. Sometimes, yes. But lonely with peace is better than surrounded with tension. I eat what I want now. When I want. No one rolls their eyes when I burn the toast. I bought a new blanket. Soft blue. The kind that hugs. I bought fresh tulips yesterday. Just because. And when I look in the mirror, I don't flinch anymore. That matters. I'm still here. Still loving. Still learning. Still whole. Not because they came back. But because I did. To myself. And maybe that's the real story. Maybe that's the beginning of the rest.